My name is Stephen Long, and I host a show here on Rock Candy called Sacred Tension, the podcast about the spiritual discipline of asking questions. We cover topics from LGBT issues to faith and doubt and mental health. We talk to biblical scholars and have conversations about religious abuse and leaving faith and finding it again. We also talk to pastors and skeptics and cult experts who are all sorting out their own journey of faith. Please join me in these conversations on Sacred Tension right here on Rock Candy.
Welcome to the 11 Life podcast.
What's up, 11 family, and welcome to this week's episode of 11 Life. I am so happy that you are here. And before we even get started, I want to give a huge shout out to everybody who was a part of our very first Rock Candy Christmas party in Greenville, South Carolina this past Friday. Oh my gosh, I had the most amazing time. It was a phenomenal experience to be able to be there with all different 11 family, fans, and friends from literally all over the continent. It was so wonderful to be able to hang out with everyone and start our holiday season off that way. And so I just want to give a huge shout out to everybody that made that possible. Special hugs and high fives to the wonderful Emily Pye. She's an absolutely beautiful soul. And if you guys are over at the 11 Life Facebook group, probably run into her there on an almost daily basis. She's absolutely amazing at making the 11 family and all the unicorns have a place and feel loved and cared for and like they belong. And so just want to give a special shout out to her because she does amazing things. We also at the show at like the very last minute had our friend Katie Gilchrist come and sing the girl part on Teenage Dirtbag. It was super fun. And I want to thank her for coming and being a part of that and lending us her voice for that song. I saw so many familiar faces there, and there were at least 20 different people that I did not even get the chance after the show to get to hang out with because we were running very late per the 11 way at this Christmas party. So I just want to give a shout out to everybody that I missed or that I was not able to hang out with. And hope that you guys have a wonderful holiday, and thank you for letting us be a part of it. Hey, big news in the 11 universe. We have a brand new album called Basic Glitches coming out on January 17th, and I cannot wait for you guys to hear this thing. We almost turned our Christmas party into a CD release show at the last minute because we're so excited. We're literally sitting here with all of this vinyl and CDs here at the Rock Candy studio and warehouse, and they are burning a hole in our pocket. I don't think that metaphor necessarily works in this situation, but we're going with it anyway. Hey, if you love this show, if you like our band, if you are in any way wanting to support what we do here, there's some really simple ways to do it. The first one doesn't cost you anything. Head over to 11tysevenisalive.com, and there on the homepage, you will find a way to pre-save our brand new album to your Spotify or your Apple Music or your Pandora or whatever it is that you prefer to use, and it would mean the world to us if you would take a few seconds and make that happen. The second way is to head over to the Rock Candy Recordings online store. You can get to it in the show notes. Every single thing that you purchase helps keep this podcast going, helps us help other creators develop podcasts that are also part of this Rock Candy network, and it absolutely moves the needle for us in ways that I can't even get into right now. There's not enough time, but it means a lot to us. And right now, you can pre-order the CD or the limited edition color vinyl of our brand new album, Basic Glitches, at that Rock Candy online store. So yeah, grab one because there's not a ton of them, and they're going to be gone before you know it. Today's episode, I am so pleased to announce that we have the one and only Finn McKenty on today's show. If you don't know him, you have to check this guy out. He has an awesome YouTube channel, which is actually how I found him. It's called the Punk Rock MBA, and it's amazing. On this channel, he reviews bands. He reviews entire scenes, entire subgenres. His channel is amazingly informative. He's a super funny dude, and he's really smart. So head on over there and let him give you something to think about. He's also a businessman and an entrepreneur, and has had his hand in several different companies, music and tech related. And yeah, he's just an all-around interesting dude that you should know about. We had an amazing time sitting down and having this conversation. I am so thankful that he came on our show as a guest. And I hope that you enjoy our conversation as well. So without further ado, Finn McKenty on 11 Life.
Hey there.
Hey, man.
Sorry about that. It drives me nuts when other people are late, and here I am being the one who's late.
Oh my gosh, it is not a problem, dude. At all.
Well, I appreciate your patience.
Yeah, no worries, man. So you just had too much coffee this morning, or what was the...
I'm in meetings and phone calls and stuff all day, sometimes back to back and to back, and sometimes it's hard to get out of them.
I totally understand that.
Yeah.
So are most of your days pretty jam-packed like this? Like you're just kind of moving from one thing to the next all the time, or?
I'm sure, it's not a contest. I know there's other people who are busier than I am, but I don't like downtime, so I try to make the most of it.
Do you have a morning ritual that you kind of gravitate towards where if you do this specific set of things, you mentally it just feels like your day is going to go better?
I do. Is this part of the podcast, by the way, or are we just chatting?
Oh, everything's always part of the podcast.
Yes, I do. The most the morning, I'm a morning person. Those are the most productive hours of the day for me. And it's also kind of where my mood gets set. I'm also a creature of habit. So I don't, there's all these Tim Ferriss type people, if you drink 12 ounces of water and 14.6 grams of turmeric, at 6:48 every morning, then your ketones will be unleashed. I'm not like that. I just know that if I do certain things, if I get up in a certain way, I just know that I'll be happier. So I get up pretty much the same time every day, 5 or 5:30, depending on my wife's schedule. And then, I work from home, but I go to the same Starbucks every day and get the same thing, hang out there and work for a while. And then I come home and work for a while. And that's pretty much what I do. I'm a creature of habit because I'm a what they call we're all cognitive misers. There's a certain amount of cognitive output that you have to spend every day, and I prefer to spend it on things that matter, not deciding where I'm going to go get coffee in the morning.
Right. So what are the things that you feel at this point in your life matter the most, and has it changed over the last few years?
Yes, it has. So the things that matter the most to me in order of priority are my relationships with my wife and our family. It's number one. That comes before everything else. Number two, mental and physical health. And number three is work. And they're all very important to me. But if, there's all these, any of us, there's moments where you have to pick between competing priorities, and that's the order that I pick them.
Man, I really appreciate that sentiment. I feel like so much of the sort of self-help culture and the protein shake kind of culture that I feel like we constantly get barraged with all kind of operates under this premise that productivity is the most important thing. And I feel like that is such a weird sort of capitalist take on something as amazing as life.
Sure.
I do think productivity is important. I love that feeling of accomplishment, and I'm a big fan of not being a lazy asshole with your life. But I have a hard time believing that productivity is the end all be all.
Well, I think people may hear that, but I don't think there's too many people actually saying that. For example, I'm a big fan of Gary Vaynerchuk. I follow his stuff a lot.
Yeah.
The company I worked for before was called Creative Live. It's an online education company for creative folks like photographers and graphic designers, people like that. And a lot of creative entrepreneurs. My boss there, the founder of the company, is a guy named Chase Jarvis, who's one of those people that's kind of in that circle of, entrepreneur influencer type people. And we worked with Gary and Tim Ferriss and Mark Cuban and Richard Branson and all those people. So I was exposed to all of them at a pretty, deep level. And I've never heard somebody actually say that productivity or work is the most important thing. I've heard all of those people say the opposite, which is if you think you're hearing me say that work comes before everything else, you're not listening, because I'm not saying that. I think people hear it that way. I think probably because they I'm going to play armchair psychologist or psychoanalyst here.
Go for it.
I think the reason why a lot of people hear that is because in their heart, they know that they could be more productive without making sacrifices, without any unhealthy sacrifices. And so I think they, it's like anything else. You feel sensitive when somebody pokes a weak spot. If you're trying to lose weight and you see a picture of somebody who looks great, you're like, what an asshole.
Right.
Dude, he didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
But that said, I do think it's very important to explicitly put that message out there, because there's a lot of people that operate that way. I mean, the way I learned that lesson was when I was 30, which was unfortunately quite a while ago. On my 30th birthday, I got dumped by the girl I was with for like 9 years. And in hindsight, that's fine. We weren't the right people for each other.
Sure.
But a big part, but it sucked at the time. And a big part of it is because I was not a very good boyfriend to her, because I put work first a lot. And when we were together, I might have been physically present, but I wasn't mentally present.
Yeah.
And I sort of knew that, but of course, especially men, we oftentimes have to learn things the hard way. You don't learn that everyone tells you not to touch the burner, but you're like, come on, man, what do you know? And then you put your hand on the red hot stove and burn the shit out of it, and you're like, all right, maybe I shouldn't touch the hot stove.
Finn, I can totally relate to that. I feel like I have a really hard time with being present as well. And it's kind of one of those things where I feel like you and I might have really similar sort of day-to-day structures, where it's like I obviously work from home, and we have the studio here. So I'm always down in the studio, either producing for bands or producing my own stuff or writing or doing some kind of computer-related function.
Yeah.
And I forget how important it is for me to see daylight during the day. And so I have so many times where my wife will come home from work and we're both kind of exhausted, and I can tell that I need to be there. It's almost like looking up from underwater at, like, I know I need to be on the top of the water, and I know what my optimal self feels like, and I know what she might want from me and what I want to be able to give, but I have such a hard time figuring out how to get there. It's almost like watching yourself from outside of yourself. And I wonder if it's just the fact that we're staring at screens all day, if that's the thing that puts us under the water, or if it's like a thought process, or I don't know if you've given this any musing time.
Oh yeah,
at all.
dude, this is all I think about every day is not specifically like being present, but just in general, like managing your own like psychology such that you can be the best person that you can be and have, the life outcomes that you want, is the only thing I think about ever. Because it's the only, like, if you get that part right, then everything else comes together. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you have the mental game under control, then you will kind of automatically do the right thing in personal or professional situations. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if you don't have that in the right place, you're going to fuck them all up. So
yeah.
At least that's how I feel about it. So I feel like this is just the foundation. Having your mental game in the right place is the foundation. And once you build that, everything else will come together on top of it.
Yeah.
So in regards to being present, it's probably different for everybody, but, I guess, I make a point to think about it in exactly the way that you said, which is like watching myself from the third person.
Yeah.
And I imagine, like, what if I was watching someone else do this and they were with their wife, but they were just like looking at their phone and half paying attention to what they were saying? I would want to slap them in the head and be like, dude, what are you doing? Stop being a dick. Like, do you want to get divorced? And so if I look at it through that imaginary camera and I realize that I'm being like that, I snap out of it real fast.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that at some point I am that person to somebody. I'll be waiting on like a really pertinent email, or I have a project that's holed up, and so I'll go out with friends, and it's like, and I am the guy on the phone. But at the same time, I also very aware of it, to the point now where I just kind of start leaving my phone in my pocket, so that I have to like get into my jeans to be able to pull it out. So it's just kind of like a mental kind of thing that pulls me back. Like, wait, why do you need this? Like, why can't you? Because I have so many friends like at this point now where it's like all of us, like, isn't it a little bit weird that all of us are going to counseling and therapy and taking pills for things like social anxiety and trying to unravel all of that? And one of the big differences between like who we were when we were kids and like who we are now is that we're completely immersed in technology, and we use it in the most intimate forms possible, like in our lives on a day-to-day basis, in ways that like I feel like is kind of unprecedented. This is not a new conversation. People have been having this conversation for the last 30 years about technology, but I feel like I'm just now in my 30s coming to the point where I'm recognizing it from the outside and not just being like, well, come on guys, isn't it awesome that we have iPhones. Like seriously, mom and dad, like get with the program.
But they were right when they were like, stop watching so much TV and go outside. Like, we're like, shut up, mom. But they were right, you know?
Yeah.
And maybe they're right. You know, maybe other people are saying like, turn off your phone and go outside. Like maybe they're right too. They probably are. I think of it like, you know, in the movies or whatever, you have to give the rules are that you have to give the vampire permission to enter the house or it can't cross the threshold.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's how I think about it with a lot of things, whether that's like a piece of technology or a person or like I stopped following the news for this reason because I realized it just made me either angry or scared or something, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
And I was like, dude, why am I letting the vampire into the house? It's not like I don't need to know this stuff. Like the world doesn't need my opinion on fill in the blanks, whatever is happening on the other side of the planet.
Yeah. And
all it does is make me stressed out or angry. So why am I letting the vampire into the house? Like you see in the movies, you're like, dude, why did you let him in? Like he's this creepy guy with a cape and these big fangs. You're like, yeah, come on in, man. Like, why did you do that? Why did you just slam the door in his face?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with any of this stuff we're talking about. It's like, well, you didn't have to take the phone out of your pocket.
Yeah.
Don't blame the phone for your lack of self-control.
And it's like a slow burn. It's a slow creeping that happens. And before you know it, it's kind of got you. So I feel like you occupy this really interesting space, at least for me on the outside looking in at what you're doing, especially with your YouTube channel. You occupy this really cool space of being a super well-informed outsider that's also kind of an insider. It's almost like you are, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. You're not necessarily like the peanut gallery to what's going on, but you're kind of like this, you're half peanut gallery, half historian, half member. It seems like whenever that's one of the things that a friend of mine sent me a link to one of the things on your YouTube channel. And I was just like, this is so informative. It's so concise. It doesn't feel judgmental at all. It feels very matter of fact, but it also feels like it's coming from a place of a genuine passion for this subsect of culture that is the amalgamation, I feel like, of rock music from when you started to take notice of it. If I'm off base with any of that, please feel free to clap back and kind of put me back on the rails.
No, I think that all sounds right to me, and it kind of depends on the video, how much of an insider I am or not. Some of the things I'm talking about, I've known the people involved for 25 years.
Yeah.
Others I don't know anybody involved with black metal, which I just made a video about today. And I don't really want to know anybody involved with black metal. So on that one, I would be more of an outsider.
Yeah.
So it kind of depends, but either way, you know, what I'm passionate about more than anything else is I like to figure out how things work and why people do the things they do and why people like the things they like, and try to explain that for people with the goal of giving them something that they can use to achieve something that they're trying to achieve, or maybe just entertain them. But really, everything I do is from the perspective of like the younger version of me who's trying to do a thing, like start a YouTube channel or a podcast or a brand or bring a product to market, whatever it is. And I just think like, man, what are the things, and I've done all those things now. What are the things that I wish I could tell myself, 10 or 15 years ago that would have helped me do it easier, and explain those things through the lens of music? Because you can't just tell those. Nobody's going to listen if you tell them about like accounting or something like that, just straight out of the textbook. They're just not going to listen to you. So it's like, how if you got to give the dog, it's like blood pressure medication, you wrap it in some hamburger and it'll take the pill. That's kind of how I think about it. I'm trying to teach people about business and I guess personal development, just wrapped in some sausage, which is music that they like.
Yeah. So I'm really fascinated by the origins of this, like what brings somebody to this is why I think you're a great educator in a lot of ways. I spent a very brief stint as a college professor, and I taught music business courses and audio production and things like that to students. And one of the things that I realized was that a lot of what I was teaching came from a place of remembering what it was like to be a teenager and feeling so lost when it came to, well, how do I know if I'm writing good songs? How do I know if how do I know what all this music terminology is? How do I know when my band is good enough? How do I know our shows are good? How, just trying to project yourself outside of yourself and then figure out what's going on to get where you need to be. Was there a specific set of circumstances maybe for you in your youth that sort of formed that?
I think I'm born this way. It's how my mom told me that one of the earliest memories or earliest things she remembers of me was I was like 3 or something like that. I don't remember it. Yeah. And I got her up at like 4 a.m. It was like, something to do, put hands. Like, that's just how I am. I don't like to relax. Yeah. And I like to figure things out. I think I'm just born that way. Yeah. For better or for worse. And sometimes it's not a good thing because, like we were just talking about, sometimes you got to turn that off. People are just like, dude, calm, like chill out. Like it's not time to think that way. It's time to just relax and enjoy this. Yeah. So that, for a lot of people, it's hard for them to be productive, and it's hard for me to not be productive. So anyway, that's just, I think I'm just born that way. I just think about it took me years to figure out some of these things, just like it does the students you're talking about, and I just, in the same way as you probably, were able to step in and go, hey, this thing that you've been trying to figure out for like 6 months, let me just take 5 minutes and I'll explain how it works. And you can finally just jump over this wall. Yeah. Yeah. I hope that I can help people have those moments where it's like, oh, finally, I figured this thing out. Yeah.
Who were those people for you when you were growing up that were kind of helping facilitate your aha moments?
Well, the best thing, I wouldn't really say, well, my dad, for one. So he was a corrections officer.
That sounds awesome.
No, it's great. He was in the Navy and then he was a corrections officer. Yeah. I didn't realize it at the time, but, so then after he got promoted to the role of counselor, which in the context of a prison doesn't mean like, hey, let's sit down and talk about your feelings. Right. It means like, okay, it looks like you've got a parole hearing coming up in 9 months. If you want to have your best chance at parole, I think you should go to this anger management program. You should go to this job training program. Yeah. I see you've had a couple infractions for this or this. Make sure you don't get one of those. Right. And they can either go, okay, cool, I got my work cut out for me, or they go, fuck you, you're not the boss of me. And then he goes, okay, well, you can do what you want. Just telling you, this is the way it works. Yeah. And so I think that idea of, owning the outcomes of your actions, for better or for worse, is something that was just ingrained in my brain from a young age. Cause he would come home from work and we'd talk about that. Yeah. And my mom she was in Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I would go to those meetings with her when I was a kid because we couldn't afford a babysitter, and AA is about a lot of the same things. Yeah. So I don't know if it was necessarily great for my happiness as a child to spend my time talking about prison or in a church basement with a bunch of people, trying to deal with alcoholism. Yeah. But I definitely learned that idea of accountability at a, very young age that stuck with me, which is that's like the best lesson you could ever learn, in my opinion. And later on, one of my cousins, who I didn't really know very well for a while, he had a crazier childhood than any of us times 10. And I won't repeat what it is, but it's absolutely insane. Yeah. Like horrible shit. But he's also the most well-adjusted, like nicest person out of all of us, which really speaks to what an amazing human he is, Yeah. And so he became an investment banker, and I didn't know anything about business or anything like that until well into my 20s, because, my dad was a blue collar guy and my mom doesn't know anything about money. Right. And to make a long story short, it became clear to my cousin that I didn't understand this stuff. And he sat me down and had a couple conversations with me that were just like someone turning the key in the lock. And I was like, oh, that's how it works. Well, that changes things. Yeah. And, sometimes just the right conversation with the right person at the right time can just completely change a trajectory of your life. And I think that was a big one for me. Another one was the guy I mentioned, Chase Jarvis, the founder of Creative Live. I have known him for 20 years and I couldn't even begin to count the number of things I've learned from him. I mean, Creative Live was a Silicon Valley venture-backed company, raised, I think, about $60 million or so. And, he's the founder and CEO and chairman of the board. So I would help him prepare for board meetings and stuff like that. I was very much a pair of helping hands, not steering the ship, but just even being part of that process of like, well, what do you think about when you go to a board meeting with people that gave you $60 million? Just being around that sort of thing I don't think you can learn that stuff any other way.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. So I was wondering if you might be able to talk a little bit about how you got into music. Like, what was it about? Because you seem like a very structured individual who values productivity, and by its very nature, I feel like there is something kind of frivolous about music.
For sure. Yeah, and I didn't realize this until I was like in my 30s. I was like, oh, that's why I don't get along with any of these people. It's like I should have been an engineer.
Right.
And I don't mean an audio engineer. I mean a real engineer. No offense.
Yeah, no.
I got into it because I saw Suicidal Tendencies on MTV News in like 1989 because they had been banned from playing in LA for years because of like gang violence at their shows.
Yeah.
And they played their first LA show in like 5 years or whatever it was. And MTV did a little deal about it. And I saw that and I was like, I don't know what this is, but it's fucking cool.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of everything.
Do you feel like, so you've done like an awful, at the very top of the episode, I'm going to fill everybody in on kind of like your greatest hits that you've done on YouTube and like all of that sort of stuff. I wonder, with all of that knowledge and all of that observation, do you feel like bands have changed in terms of like what we were experiencing in the late 90s to where they are now? So
I think that a lot of the most creative, talented people with something to say have gone towards rap instead of rock. I think the cream of the crop is in rap now. I think if we're speaking specifically about bands, I do think that they are kind of lacking ideas. There's not to say that they aren't out there, but broadly speaking, yeah, I think they're kind of just executing on the game plan, kind of mindlessly just executing on the game plan that they think somebody else established 10 years ago without really having any clear, like you said, no real like clear vision.
Yeah.
Like to use a band like NoFX, whether you like them or not, I mean, they were definitely blazing their own trail.
Right.
And I don't think that there's as much of that in rock now. Rock is kind of traditionalist to me. I think the interesting new stuff that's happening is happening in rap. Again, I'm painting with broad strokes here. You could find plenty of counterexamples to everything I just said, but I think that's the pattern.
When you say that, do you mean like thematically, lyrically, creatively, sonically?
All of the above.
Okay.
And the other thing is that I think rock bands or people in rock don't understand that this is the entertainment business. It's not a songwriting contest. It's not like a mix contest.
Yeah.
It is the entertainment business.
Right. Like
nobody gives a shit how great the mix on your song is if it's a bad song and you have nothing to say.
Yeah.
And they get very fixated on things. I mean, this, very fixated on snare sounds. And it's like, dude, nobody cares.
Yeah.
Nobody cares.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I care, but like, because my company teaches people how to mix. And so I don't mean to say that production doesn't matter, because it does, but like it's in an order of priorities. And we would say the same thing. It's like the song, the arrangement, then the mix.
Yeah.
Actually the song, the arrangement, the engineering, then the mix.
Yeah.
But anyway, and then above all of that is the layer of like, what are you saying and who are you? What is your mission? Like, what's your point of view? Why are you doing this? And if you were to ask a lot of bands that, it's kind of like, because we want to write some cool riffs.
Yeah.
That's not enough. There's not a shortage of cool riffs in the world, Right. Whereas you look at in rap, I'm really interested in how all these alternative rappers are the new face of alternative culture in the same way that like pop punk or metalcore or whatever was in previous generations. It's these alternative rappers now. Like there's a kid that I talk about a lot. His name is Shinigami. And if you look him up, I mean, he's just a kid in his room in, New Jersey, and the production values and all this stuff is terrible.
Yeah.
But it's connecting. I mean, he has like 300,000 listeners on Spotify, which is amazing for like a 20-year-old kid doing all this like out of his bedroom on an iPhone 6. That is proof to me that like vision and personality trump everything else. And so I think I think what I'm hearing you say is that that's kind of what's missing from rock. Is ironically, I would say the production and the musicianship are better than ever, but the vision and personality and ideas, I think, are not there as much.
Yeah, I'm definitely the guy to spend a little bit too much time on a snare.
Well, that's your job. You should be that guy,
Right.
Like you don't want your producer to be like, oh, who gives a shit about the snare sound? And I don't mean to say that it doesn't matter either, too, because actually, speaking about snares, like if you fuck up the snare, it can kind of ruin the whole song. So maybe I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here, but I'm just saying that everything matters, but it's important to understand where everything sits and what you should be focusing on at any given time. And there's no point in sitting in your bedroom auditioning drum samples when you have nothing to say.
Right.
Like you can worry about that later. When you have a song that people care about, that's connecting with people and have a message that you need to get out there, then maybe we think about drum samples, but don't start there.
Right. I feel like that's something that people don't necessarily talk about as much as like, well, what are you saying? What is the vibe that you're trying to get across? And it's something that I only in my late 20s started to understand. Like our band obviously got signed when we were really young, like at 19, and kind of got thrust into this whole like Christian rock subculture. And when I look back on all of those things, my experience in that industry, I feel like I didn't really have anything to say yet because I was still living life. I hadn't had no life experience to be able to draw from. Almost everything that I had to say was this regurgitation of subculture. It was things that I had heard other people say, or me talking about these very like base teenage relationships that I was in that had a lot of complexity to me in the moment. But as an adult, just kind of feel fluffy. You know what I mean?
I think that's a good way of putting it. I think a lot of people are just regurgitating what they've seen other people do because they don't have anything else to say. So like, okay, well, I'll just repeat what this guy said.
Yeah.
And I mean, you got to start somewhere. So I don't mean to be like, you kids, shut up, don't even try. I don't mean that. I'm just saying, like, I actually do think everybody has something to say. You just have to find it.
Yeah, and I definitely. What I don't want is for this conversation to come across as something that would be discouraging to an up-and-coming songwriter. I feel like I had so many people tell me throughout the course of our career, like, hey, man, like you're almost there. You just kind of need to find your voice. I would have people constantly telling me that. And I had no idea what they meant because maybe that wasn't the best articulation of what they were trying to say. And I feel like the older that I've gotten, the more I've understood that to mean get a grasp on what the world is doing to you and how you're responding to it, and come up with a vernacular for being able to express that in a way that aids other people through the same thing that you're going through. And so that's kind of been as close to a moniker as I can get for like where I am as an individual, as an artist now.
So looking back to when you were 19, if you could like transport yourself back there, like what would you say that your voice was then? Like if you could have found it then, like what would it be? Does that make sense?
Yeah, my voice was definitely like put something positive into the world. Like we also had this ethos about our band that was like all these feels that we get, going to these punk rock shows and going to these rock shows like in our hometown and like going on road trips to go see bands. This feeling that we have in the audience, let's take that and recreate that for other people. We didn't necessarily have like the lyrics, you know what I mean? Like the lyrical prowess to be able to make something like that happen at the time. But we knew that there was this thing, this subculture, this scene, this live performance aspect of things that we wanted so badly to be a part of and that we wanted to help facilitate for other people. And it's only after I feel like we kind of got started getting really disillusioned with the whole Christian rock world and the sort of marriage of religion with the music industry, that we finally felt like we had something to say, because we felt like we had witnessed injustices, we had witnessed cultural damage being done to people, we had witnessed the fallout of a lot of things, and felt like we had a perspective on it that was worth sharing. And yeah, so that might have been too much. I know.
No,
yeah.
that's super interesting.
Yeah, but you had this really cool episode about the death of Christian core, and when I was watching through it, I was just like, wow, this. You had such an articulate way of describing that landscape and not being down on anybody for it, like almost like accepting the good and the bad.
We have to. I mean,
it.
nothing is purely good, or well, I shouldn't say nothing, but very few things are purely good or purely bad, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think the media landscape that we live in, you're encouraged to paint things in one way or the other. You're especially encouraged to make things seem like they're terrible, because we reward outrage with our attention, unfortunately. But I don't want to play that game. If that's what it takes to get attention, then fine, then I don't want attention. But I think that there's a lot of people in the world that don't want to play that game and are interested in somebody that will, try to be a little bit more reasonable. So with that video, I mean, I was actually nervous about that one. Like in the beginning, I think I said something along the lines of, hey, like, let's be cool here because this could be a touchy topic.
Yeah.
I was expecting the reaction to that to be a disaster with, in particular, a bunch of people who hate Christianity leaving terrible comments. And I got almost none of that. The comments are fantastic, mostly from Christians like yourself saying, hey, this came out really well. Like, thank you for making this, which was cool. And like, that's proof to me that there is an audience for, what I hope is thoughtful, reasonable content around a subject that, is really emotionally charged, and that we can still talk about these things in a respectful way and come together on this thing that has unfortunately divided people a lot.
Yeah. No. And again, I thought that you did an amazing job. I myself, I feel like ultimately where this story ends for me is I don't identify myself as being a Christian. I haven't been a part of church or of that sort of subculture in actually quite a while now, and it's taken a long time for me to kind of undo the yarn, and trace it back to like, how did this get so bad? Like what exactly happened? And it was a combination of the underbelly of that scene that you were talking about, seeing the disparity between the two things of like constantly trying to shove this faith redemption narrative into music subculture that was also primarily capitalist. Like we're here to make money.
And hedonic.
Right. And so it's like we never fit in entirely with that culture because we were never comfortable exploiting our faiths or our belief, especially because we saw them changing so quickly. It's like, I'm not going to get up here and tell you that I've found the exact perfect way for you to live your life when mine's constantly falling apart. Like, especially when you're in a touring band, it always is. Like something is always happening. So
that's another thing I could have touched on in that video, or it applies to a lot of them, is like, it is such a tough situation to put oftentimes what were like kids, like teenagers, people in their early 20s who were living on the road, which is not the healthiest atmosphere and certainly isn't great for your like maturity. Like, it's not like, you know what I mean? Like, that's not, if you want to help a 19-year-old dude grow into a man that is an example of what a human can be, putting them in a rock band is not not going to help.
Yeah.
So you're putting these kids in already difficult circumstances and then expecting them to be like the flag bearers for, Christ-like behavior. It's like, dude, no, like who could possibly live up to that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, come on. That is like, of course they failed. Anybody would. Yeah,
it's totally weird. And we've done a bunch of episodes where we kind of like dive into this sort of stuff, and I'll go off on a rant and I could like talk your ear off about our experience in that subculture. But Yeah, I was like, when I was watching your videos, it kind of brought me back to this place of like, well, I wonder what are things that you specifically are looking for in bands now? Like, what do you feel like are the characteristics of bands that interest you the most and sort of grab your attention? Maybe not what's going to make them the most marketable thing, but for you individually.
Well, to be honest, at this point in my life, I just look at music in a detached way. Especially because, my job is I run a company that teaches people how to produce music. It's hard for me to be, I'm not 17 anymore, and I'm not looking for music to like tell me what to believe or how to behave or fill a void in my life or something. Like I can't look at it the same way. Yeah. It would be sad if I could, because we would hope people would be in a better place at my age than they were when they're 17.
Sure.
So to me, I'm just looking for people, like, I'm excited when anybody executes their vision really well. Like, it doesn't matter whether I like it or not. I'm excited when I see anybody that does a great job of bringing their vision to life, whatever that vision is.
So what do you feel like would be these indicators that somebody has done a really good job of expressing that vision?
Well, I guess the layer on top of that is what makes me really excited is when I see that they've connected with their audience in a way that makes other people feel good. Because there's bands that do that in a way that I think is a net negative for the world, that make people angry and hateful and unhappy and stuff like that. And, I can't do what you want to do, but it's nothing that is interesting to me. So if you can do that in a way that helps people or makes them happy, then that's exciting to me.
What do you think is the most interesting thing happening in music right now? Do you think it's the shift towards more sort of like hip hop?
Yeah, I am very interested in all these alternative rappers, and they've been around for a while now, but all those people they're not, the thing people need to understand is like, this is not like rappers influenced by rock, or like, this is rock. Like, they're part of rock culture. They're not part of hip hop culture. Like, for example, just saw this guy Ghostmane, who's one of the more popular people in that genre. Like, he has nothing to do with hip hop culture. Like, people who listen to Kendrick don't listen to Ghostmane, you know what I mean? Or even underground rappers. Like, it's a completely separate world. Like, you go to see a show and you're going to see people in death metal shirts and stuff. Yeah. Like, he's part of rock culture. The only and a lot of these people use guitars and stuff now. The only real difference is the percussion. And it's just like 808s instead of acoustic drums, right? Which for some reason that seems to be a really crazy thing for people to digest. But to me, I guess it doesn't seem like that big of a deal to me. But people have some very strong feelings about drum samples, as I'm sure you know.
Yes, very true.
It's like, dude, like, your life, I'm so jealous of you that your life is in such a great place that you can make drum samples your feelings about drum samples can be this important. Because on my list of priorities, like, drum samples are so far down the list, I can't even find it.
Yeah. So you had mentioned earlier in the conversation that, like, now when you're thinking about music, on the whole, you almost feel detached from it. And I totally understand that in terms of like your relationship to music. Obviously, maybe should change, like when you're in your 20s and 30s than when it's like this more formative thing in your early teens. But I wonder if you experience joy from it at all anymore, or if you just feel so detached from it that you're like, I find it interesting, but I don't find it as moving as I did in my younger.
It's that self. It's just a craft to me now. Like, when I get joy out of it is especially like mostly if I don't actually listen to music that much. I mostly listen to like business and technology podcasts. Yeah. But if I listen to music, it's almost always like pop, like, Ariana Grande or Demi Lovato or something like that. Yeah. And what gives me joy is when I hear a really good like vocal arrangement or something. I'm like, fuck, that was good. Because I mean, you know how this stuff goes. Like, it is so hard to craft like those pop arrangements that create movement through the song without a casual listener noticing it. Yeah. That is so hard. It's such a difficult challenge to like, it's the same thing as a movie. Like, a movie, you shouldn't notice what the camera is doing. You should just be paying attention to the movie the whole time.
Right. Right.
You shouldn't notice, oh, the director chose this angle for this reason. You should just be paying attention to what's happening. So that's like, again, it's just a craft to me. Like if somebody executes the craft really well, that's exciting to me. But I don't have that I just don't have that emotional connection to it the way that I used to. I have that emotional connection to certain people that I know through music, or I experience joy. Like if somebody that I know in a band puts out a record that people really like, that makes me happy for them because they're my friend. And I'm really happy to see my friends be successful.
Yeah. And experience that sort of personal fulfillment, or creative fulfillment in that way.
Like there's, I don't know, do you know the band Issues?
Yeah.
So I've known those guys for a long time. They've had a tough couple years for various reasons, like band lineup changing and blah, blah, blah. And they put out this new album and it's really, really, really good. And people like it. And that made me happy because I know I know what they went through to make that record and get it across the finish line. And it turned out really well. And that made me really happy.
Yeah.
And I happen to really like the album too, but, it's just different, it's like, almost like I feel like, for one, I'm twice as old as some of these people, So it's almost like I feel like I'm watching like my little brother or little sister succeed in a way. And it's just a different relationship. I get excited if I ever help somebody achieve a thing that they're trying to achieve. That makes me really happy. Like consuming music is just not that interesting to me.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just not.
Yeah. Well, it can be the same thing as like what we were talking about earlier, where your parents are telling us to turn the TV off. Like, I feel like it can be that same sort of like content drain that it's taking away some of your cognitive energy that you could be giving to something else.
I mean, we could spend all day listening to new bands for what? Right. And I'm not saying it's worthless. I'm just saying like, it's just not what I want to do with my time right now. But the culture, I'm very excited about the culture and the people involved. And it's a community as much as it is, just music, and I really want to, if I can help the people in the community, I'm more passionate about that than ever, because I'm in a place in my life where I hope that I've learned a few things that I didn't know when I was 22. And if I can help people, that would make me very happy. It's just, I just feel like I have other things that I'm interested in besides consuming the latest song.
Of course.
I guess.
Yeah. No, I feel like it's the same thing for me. I don't feel like there are bands that come along now that I ever get as excited or as invested in as I did when I was younger. It definitely does feel more like my interest with other bands is in the execution. It is in the craft. It is saying, wow, that's a really, that production is so concise, and I can see like all of the little micro decisions that went into propping this vocal and this idea up, and like what that arrangement is. And I get far more excited about those kinds of things, which maybe makes the bands that I'm into a little more nerdy and technical than they were when I was younger, and everything was just power chords and angst. But yeah, that's awesome. Well, so what would be the outlet that you have right now that you feel like you experience the most creative fulfillment in? Well,
YouTube is cool. That's what I spend probably 20% of my time on. 80% of my time is spent running our company, which you may know about it if you ever, have you ever seen ads for like Nail the Mix?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's our company.
Awesome.
So we teach people it's an online school for rock and metal producers. Some of the producers and artists we've had on, we had Andrew Wade with The Day to Remember, had Frederick Nordstrom with Bring Me the Horizon. We've had like Meshuggah, Gojira, Lamb of God, Neck Deep. I mean, pretty much any band like that.
Yeah.
Right now we've got Between the Buried Me on. So that's cool. And I run all the operations there. So my partner, A.L. Levy, handles all the kind of content and recruiting the producers and stuff like that. Since he's a far better producer than I am. And, he's more qualified to do that than I am. And I do everything else. So I find right now, we just restructured our customer support team, and that's something I'm putting a whole lot of energy into. And that's a creative challenge to me, is how do I improve, the outcomes for our support team? Like the things we measure, what can I do to improve those?
Yeah.
I get the same kind of creative satisfaction out of that as I might have gotten out of writing a song years ago.
Yeah.
It's just a puzzle to crack to me. Or, I manage all the technology stuff too. So I work with the contractors and like front end and back end stuff. We just like redid our whole billing system, for example, which sounds really boring, but it matters a lot because that's the part of the company where we actually, capture money from our members. And we were losing a lot of money because of problems with that billing system. People weren't getting charged that were supposed to get charged. And I fixed all that. And that makes me feel really good because it's like, okay, I figured out how to crack the challenge of like all this money that was like leaking out every month. I fixed it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's actually the most creatively fulfilling to me. And I wouldn't have been able to do that work until recently, but just like the ultimate challenge, creative challenge to me is like working with a team of people and helping that team live up to their full potential is the ultimate challenge to me because it's fucking really hard to like lead other humans to live up to their full potential is really, really, really hard. And because it's so hard, it's also really rewarding, at least to me.
Man, I love that. What do you feel like is next for you? What's like the next big challenge for you that you're excited about taking on? So
for 2020, the big challenge for our company, for URM Academy, Nail the Mix, is, we're a fully distributed company. Our team is in Atlanta and here in Seattle, and we've got some people in LA. We've got a guy in Colombia.
Yeah.
And so, and I think we've been operating as individuals for the past couple of years and getting good results. But I think to get where we need to go in 2020, we've got to be operating as a team that's bigger than any one of us, rather than individuals all kind of doing their own thing. We've got to act as a group that's all marching in the same direction. And so my challenge is to lead us there. And it's hard. It's so intimidating. But I also know that I can do it. I'm 100% confident that I can do it. I know it's going to be hard, but I also know that I can do it. And so I'm going to hold myself to that standard, and I'm not going to let myself, I'm going to insist on the highest standards for myself.
Well, I think that you have an amazing skill set that sounds like it was very hard won and chiseled away at over the years. And I am very excited to see what happens next for you with all these irons that you have in the fire. And can't wait to see what your next YouTube video is going to be too.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me. And if there's anything I can do to help you out, then always, don't be shy.
Thank you, Finn. It's been a pleasure.
11T Life is a production of Rock